so everybody go and get the type tool. Now, if you get stuck, stick your hand up and I'll come around. But we are going to have a look at this type tool. So, recording. So get the T for type, this one, and type. When you drag on the page, you see you get a whole lot of type automatically coming in. You can drag and select that to get rid of it and just type what you want. So we're going to type electric lily because that's the name of our band. And when I drag over it, it's just like Word. If you drag over it, you're selecting it. And you've got type tools. If they're not showing, just do Command T, Apple T, Command T, and then that'll bring that tools, there's tools up for character, and there you can change your point setting. So obviously I want it quite a bit bigger. And again, maybe I want to go and find a much more interesting font. So in the character, you can obviously go and get all sorts of fonts, and we can also download sort of more interesting ones if you feel like this is a little bit limited. I'm going to choose that one because it's nice and fat. And if you get that little red symbol, it just means your box isn't big enough and you just need to drag it down a bit. Okay, so everybody get some type, the words electric lily, onto the page and then make it nice and big. Now it goes to 72 point, but you can type in any point size you want there. So I could type 150 in there. Generally, if you hit the return key, it applies what you did, whatever it is. And then I can drag that box down and show my type nice and big. So I'm going to play around with the words electric lily. You don't have to choose the same font, but just choose something to work with. So let's just get everybody to that stage. And then we're going to go on and we're going to learn to outline the fonts and play with them as type. So first get the type on the page, any font you like, and then we're going to learn to turn the type into shapes and make those shapes interact with each other. So I'm just going to check that everybody's got something to work with on the page. So if you can't find the character, just Apple T. Chosen. Doesn't matter, it's just to play with. Obviously, the idea is for you to be a bit more selective and choose a more interesting font, and we've got something that says electric blue. Perfect. So that's great. Looks like everybody's got type and they've managed to make it nice and big and fat on the page. So you just get it nice and big. Yep, you can even type in 150 massive. Not a big range of fonts there, but that doesn't mean we can't get better ones. So we can actually download quite a few free fonts and put them on our system and have access to them. But I won't do that now, we'll do that a bit later. So now you've got this nice big fat font. Let's turn it into shapes. The way you do that is to make sure that you've got the black selection tool. So the black selection tool there, that selects whole objects. If I want to deselect something, if I don't want to have it selected, I want to select something else, I actually have to just click off the object. You can see that's no longer selected. So to select something in Illustrator, you click on and just move the cursor off and click outside it to deselect it. Because sometimes you have several things on the page. So that's going to get the whole object and we can move the whole thing around. The next tool is called the direct selection tool, and that gets bits of things. So once we get these turned into shapes, you'll see how powerful that is. So if you want to select parts of things, you use that white It's called direct selection tool. You want the whole object, you choose the black selection tool. Okay, so let's now turn these bits of type from type into shapes. And we do that by going to the type, create outlines. So just create outlines, and suddenly you'll see that you can't select it with your type tool anymore. I can't select it, and I can't change the spelling or the font. It's now just shapes. However, they are grouped, so you'll need to go type, create outlines, and then you'll need to go object, ungroup, or shift command G. Notice that Illustrator, all the programs give you shortcuts here so you can learn them eventually once you use a lot. So ungroup, that's in the object menu, ungroup. So you have to go to the type menu to create outlines, but you go to the object menu and say ungroup. When you do that, you'll suddenly find that you can now grab each letter by itself, and even the hyphen there, and move it around. So each of those things is now a separate object. It's not type anymore, it's just become a shape. So I just want everybody to get to that point and just have a go at moving them around on the page, because that's the basics. So you no longer got type, you've got shapes, and you'll notice you can change the size. If you don't want it to distort, then hold the shift key down. That'll constrain it from distorting. So have a little go at shrinking some, enlarging others. That's the first thing, and then we'll do some other stuff that's even more interesting in a minute. I'll just make sure everybody's got that. Did we manage to create outlines and ungroup them? Yes, we did. Did you manage to, yeah? So type menu to create outlines. So type menu, type. So this is the first create outlines. Now it's not type anymore. It's an object. It's all groups. So you'll go object, ungroup. Yeah, that's it. Now click off it to deselect. That's one of the weird things about Illustrator. And now if you just use that tool, you can just shift them up and down. Yeah, and if you hold down the shift key, you can drag the corner and make some letters bigger and some smaller. That's it. Perfect. So just have a little play with it. So now you're liberating your type, and you're able to play with it in a much more interesting way. So everybody got create outlines and then ungroup. So the trick is that the create outlines is in the type menu. You got that? We ungroup it? Yeah, so yes, good. So you can move them around. So it is tricky because the type menu is where you outline it, but then the object menu is where you ungroup it. And then you click off it, you click back on, you go get to the visual. I know it's weird, Illustrator makes you click off to do something, and then click back on. It's not particularly intuitive compared to using a tablet or other programs. Now the next fun thing that we can do is this tool called Pathfinder, but also to understand that, remember I said there's this white arrow here that lets you get parts of things. So that's where you then can click on your letter and you can actually start dragging individual points. So you can really start to hand design or alter an existing font. So you can see that that's got a lot of potential. So if I drag those corners, I can kind of redesign it and distort it. But practice clicking off it to deselect, and try clicking on at one of the points, and you can see you can drag the points around. So you can totally hand design your font. So you can really change it a lot. So instead of just using, your company has the same typeface as another company's, you might use the same typeface, but you alter it so it's quite unique. So nobody else can have this. Okay, so has everybody mastered that, you think? So the difference between moving the whole object, you need the black. So if you just want to move the position or select one letter to move it around or change its colour or whatever, then it's that black selection tool. When you want part of it, or you want to start mucking around with individual points, click off it and click back on with the white selection tool and see how crazy you can make your font. Remember, we're just playing here. We're not actually doing anything with our design yet, because you need a little bit of practice to be able to use these tools. So I'm just doing crazy things with one point on these letters consistently to make them quite individual. But notice I can't get the point. I have to kind of click off it, click back on, and when you get that sort of hollow white, you'll know you've got the point and you can change it. So have a go with that. And then we're going to do one more thing with a new tool called the Pathfinder, which lets you intersect the shapes and chop things out of them. So let's just make sure everybody's got their hand using the direct selection tool. Are we getting it? Yeah, that's a crazy thing, isn't it? So then I think also, yeah, that's a good. Now you want one off. And you go back on. So see one of the color, and then you can go. So just practice, and if you want to move your object, switch back to the other one, and then you can move the whole thing. Yeah. So yeah, just going to be basic. We're not analysing that font symbol. This isn't your real design. This is just black. If you want to try it again with another font, it's not quite crazy. You can pick one and close it, switch to it. Just practice grabbing individual points. Yeah. Yeah, so you can really tweak it. So it's your own design. Really change it. Alright, the last thing I'm going to throw at you is Pathfinder. So I want everybody to go to the window menu and find Pathfinder. So it doesn't live anywhere else. You've actually got to go to the window menu and look for it. There it is. It's called Pathfinder. And open that. Just close some of my, here it is, Pathfinder. So let's have a look at Pathfinder. What can Pathfinder do? And well, I'll also talk about changing colours and so on. But Pathfinder lets you overlap these letters and create new forms or add a graphic onto a letter. Okay, so let's try it. Has everybody found Pathfinder? So you need that little menu open. So you go to the window menu and look for Pathfinder, this one. Everybody find it? And then you're going to go to your menu and use that black selection tool to select one of them. And I'm just going to double click over here and change the colour just for a second, just so you can kind of see the two things interacting. So I'm just going to overlap two of my letter forms just for the heck of it. So you need to put them over the top of each other for this to work. That's why I sort of picked two fairly fat fonts. So remember, this can work with shapes as well, and I'll show you that in a minute. So overlap them so they're on top of each other. Once they're on top of each other, drag over them so that both are selected, or hold down the Shift key and click on them both. That's another way of selecting both objects. Now you can see there's an overlapping section in there, and I'm going to hit this thing called divide here. I'm going to hit that, and it's going to chop my object up into different shapes where I overlapped it. And then when I go back to the direct selection tool, I can then select that overlapped object, and I can give it a completely different colour. I don't know what's happening there. Why is it not changing? Or maybe I'll just delete it so you can see it. I just deleted it so you can see that it's it's made a third shape where the two overlapped. I'll just get my swatches up so I can change the colours a bit more. Oh, we were on RGB, that's why. Okay, so now I've changed the colour. So you can see it's got 3 colours there. It's actually made new shapes, which I could just pull apart now. So, yeah, I'm going a bit crazy here. It doesn't really read like a letter anymore, but you can see how useful that is. Perhaps you want to join your letter onto another shape. So I'll just show you how you would do that. Or you just want to overlap 2 of your letters, divide them, and then delete the little shape in between. But notice I can't delete anything if I don't switch tools. So remember, when you want part of something, you've got to switch to the white deselection tool, click off to deselect, and now I can just select the bit that's overlapped between them and delete it. So there's just that little bit. So you can create some very interesting type designs either by filling in the overlap shape, or you can, what's quite common is if you want to reverse it out of another shape. So I'm going to draw a square and put one of my letters in that square. Say this one, change its colour just so you can see it. Oh yes, I've got to bring it to the front. So once I've got it overlapping the object, so it could be another letter or it could be a shape, and if you drag up the corners you can resize it. So now I've got it sitting on top of a square, and it becomes a really interesting shape to work with. Again, if I drag over both of them or shift select, it'll allow the interaction, and you can experiment with all of these different ones. You have all sorts of different tools here. My favourite is divide, because it's just chopping up the things where they overlap. So at the moment they don't really overlap much, but say I put that to the edge, because I want this to kind of expand around the box. Now if I hit divide, I can then go with the direct selection tool and I can get rid of those extra shapes and click my letter form inside the square. So I've basically made a completely new design of my letter. So have a little go with it. That's probably the most I want to cover now. But the main thing is to just understand that selecting, you click on, click off the object to deselect. The white selection tool lets you grab points. Okay, so that'll let you really customise your letters and fonts. And then to move them around, you use the black selection tool, and that'll move its position. And then if you want to scale something, you just grab the corner and drag. However, you can see that that's distorting it. If I don't want to distort it, I've got to hold down the Shift key to drag up and down. So just have a practice play, experiment with the Pathfinder tool, and then go back to your Electric Lily design and have a go and see what you can do to apply this to the design of the name of the band, to make something a little bit interesting. So you can start with a more interesting font. You know, if you've got a really ordinary one, the default is Myra Pro. So if you find that you've got a default font that's just giving you that one, go and change it to something a bit more interesting that you think suits the band, and then start playing around so you understand how to scale them up so all your letters do not have to be the same size. All right, let's see how everybody went. I'm going to stop now and just see how you're going. But I'll put this on, I think, week 4 on the Moodle if you want to go back over the steps again. But the main thing is to understand that type, so I'll just do it one more time. Just create a new one. So the really big thing to understand is that type tool, let's go electric again. That's when you can edit the word, when you've got the type tool. And you can change the font at this point. Once you outline it, you can't change the font. So you want to go and find an interesting font for your design before you go and outline it. So let's say I choose that one. I can still add onto that, so I can, I could change the font, I can edit it if I've made a spelling mistake, etc. It's just type. To turn it into an object, I've got to change back to that black selection tool, have it selected as an object, go to the type menu and say create outlines. That's the important step that turns it into a graphic, which I can then start playing with. But remember, there's one more step if you want to be able to edit the letters individually, and that is to go to the object menu and ungroup. Now it's still selected, so I need to click off it, and then when I click back on, I'll find that I can move those individual letters, which are no longer letters. Yeah, they're actually shapes now, not letters. So that's where you can really get designing and make an interesting, even if you don't distort the letters, even if you're just playing with how they sit, you can start to see that I can get a much more interesting design. Oh, and yes, of course, you can rotate things as well. But now I'm getting what I would call a type design as opposed to just plonking a font down. So just plonking a font down and using it as is not really a logo design, because anybody else can just plonk that font down too. To turn it into a piece of graphic design, you need to be able to make it quite unique. So that's what we're trying to do. Now that doesn't mean you couldn't hand draw this font and trace it on the Wacom tablet, or if you've got your own tablet. That's fine as long as it turns into a vector drawing. So lots of people have done that. They've actually hand drawn the font and then traced it up into Illustrator. That's perfectly fine. But you'll find the same thing. Once you've got it into Illustrator, you want to be able to select it as an object, click off it, and then manipulate the actual points of it. Now you can see these, one more thing I'll add in, which you'll probably forget, but I'll say it anyway. You also can turn a hard point like that into a curve point. So under the pen tool, you have the anchor point tool, and if you click and drag with that, you can turn a hard point into a soft point and vice versa. So you click and drag to get a curve point, click, and it goes back to a hard point. That's hiding under the pen tool in your toolbar. Okay, so I'm just going to let everybody play, and if you want to change the colours, bring up your colour, which is in the window palette. So if you're looking for the colour palette, go to the colour, and then you should be able to change colours. But again, you've got to select the object, then you can eyedropper colours in, you can double click to find new colours, etc. Okay, so I'm going to leave you to play now. I'm going to turn this off, but I'll put this on the week 4 Moodle.